All right. Peace, y'all. It is I, the Emma Energy Master, Allah, and we are coming to the end of the 19 Code lecture series because upon doing my review to prepare for this one, you see a little recap of what we touched on in 5.1. After reviewing everything, it looks like I'm going to have to do a whole another lecture series on just this right here. This is the meat and potatoes right here. And I will spend time on this right here. But what I want to do today to start off this conversation before we dive into what the Matrix is, how it was made, what we're supposed to do within it. We're going to take a look at the first part of the commentary in my book, The Leopard in the Mirror, Canticle of the Mutant Guardian. If you don't have a copy of that, make sure you go ahead and grab that off of Amazon. Screenshot this if you need to. But go ahead and do that because it occurred to me that much of what I could teach past this point is basically what the commentary explains. So it explains a lot of things, but then I just received some new, I guess you could say, translation, some new clarification to give y'all that can help us put a wrap on figuring out what this 19 is in this 19 code. We already given you pretty vast idea of it, but this is the meat and potatoes. So from this book, so the commentary starts with a section called the Syrian image. And so, we've talked about the, the horn man, the elk man, the little glyph that makes the vulture lady or bird lady at the bottom and all of that, and so on and so forth. And so, I demonstrated in a previous video as well how those four come together to make an image. So that's what's depicted here. And so I start this section off with basically the last part of Dante's Divine Comedy, just to kind of show how it transitions into everything I've been talking about. But he says, within itself and in its coloring, seemed to be painted with our human likeness, so that my eyes were wholly focused on it, as the geometer who sets himself to square the circle and who cannot find, for all his thought, the principle he needs. Just so was I on seeing this new vision. I wanted to see how our image fuses into the circle and finds its place in it. Yet my wings were not meant for such a flight, except that then my mind was struck by lightning, through which my longing was at last fulfilled. Dante Paradiso, Canto 33, lines 130 through 141. So catch that significance of 130 based on what I told you about the ladder and Sinai, and the significance of 33 as it relates to Jacob or Jacob. It's deep already. So you got Jacob 33 and the ladder 130 in Gematria. I promise you I did not know this when I wrote the book. I was channeling something, y'all. I was channeling my own stuff. Channeling my chi. We all got this spark that leads directly to the divine. Well, at least most of us. You just have to connect spirit. But it goes on to say in the book, I said, well, Dante stopped short right before the goal line, but glimpsed just enough to know there was something more behind the veil. I'm not surprised that he was struck down, because during my first time learning to project my consciousness into the heavens, I was met at the Antares gate by a praying mantis who scanned my mind for the correct understanding before allowing me entry. He found the carbuncle for which he sought and greeted me like an old friend from the block. I was permitted to enter a realm like unto rivers of opal milk and solid clouds of honey. Yet even this experience paled in comparison to what I would see once I learned to exit my body completely, following my son to the other side to confirm that physical death is not the end. I've known all too well that what can't be shown and proven to another may as well be trick knowledge. While anyone can be taught to have a proper out-of-body experience, some need a little more convincing to even consider the possibility. Encountering what I later learned to be my chi in Igbo terms, distinct from ki, chi, or other forms used in Asia for the word life force, I was shown that all the tools that had been given to me over the previous 2 years in the form of visualizations and math for which I had not yet comprehended the purpose would come to be my unique contribution to the great work of awakening people to the other side. So that segues into the 19th degree in the 120 lessons in the 1 to 40. It says, if a civilized person does not perform his duty, what must be done? And then it goes on to answer, if a civilized person does not perform his duty, which is to teach the uncivilized, they should be punished with a severe punishment. Then it proceeds to give you 2 Bible verses in the lessons that are associated with this. And within those lessons, those are probably partially some of the most abused verses in the Bible with regards to how Christianity was used as a tool for enslavement. But it largely has to do with misunderstanding of the nuance of the lesson, which is clarified to a great extent in the next degree, the 20th degree, which says, what is the meaning of civilization? When we say a civilized person, what do we mean by civilization? Answer, one having knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, refinement, and is not a savage. In the pursuit of, see, we say it in the pursuit of happiness, the way I was taught it in the 5%. So not just, well, maybe it is equated to the pursuit of happiness, but not losing yourself, not losing the knowledge of yourself in the pursuit of your happiness. Okay. And the word happiness comes from a meaning of cadence. So it's like you're in the pursuit of rhythm, you're in pursuit of harmony with your existence. And as you notice, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, and then power, refinement are the numbers 1 through 5. So again, we are dealing with something having to do with the 5 points. La, arm, leg, arm, head. Okay, so we're trying to find the cadence, that rhythm, that alignment. And that's what it means to be civilized. It doesn't mean to go and impose your own ways and thoughts on somebody else. It means learning how to connect with the source to know what your duty is. What's your assignment? What's your akaraka? Why were you sent here in the first place? This ain't just some airy-fairy, esoteric, spiritual stuff. This is real science that I have been fortunate enough in the process of doing this with y'all, of understanding how to explain it now. But that said, it is so deep and so extensive and so advanced that, I have perfect faith that given enough time, you'll get it. I'll be able to break it down for you. But in the pursuit of clarity, in order to Arabize, in order to dragonate this situation to where it can be stated clearly and efficiently or whatever, this is why I do these videos with you guys, so I can figure out how to explain this as effectively and efficiently as possible. And as it turns out, the concept of a matrix in math happen between that and geometry itself turns out to be the easiest way to explain this thing. And a lot of the confusion happens when it comes to scripture, mostly because of just receiving words without knowing the geometrical relationships between them so that you can clarify and be able to have an error correction system within it to make sure there's no errors in your thinking. All right. And so when we talk about duty, it brings us, I can erase this stuff right here. This is stuff from yesterday that I left up here just so you can know where we're picking up at. I'm going to go ahead and erase that, make me some room, because we're going to need it. We about to get busy, y'all. Yes, y'all, and it don't stop. All right, but you got all those geometries, the idea of the tetrahedron as fire, and the idea of the icosahedron as the water, and how it had the Merkaba inside of you know this, man. We've talked about this. All right. Some of y'all are repeat offenders, but we've talked about this, you know how like when you're in trouble with the principal or with a parent or something, they hit you with it. We've talked about this. Nah, I'm just messing with y'all. But anyway, so duty. So that concept of duty, I don't think it's my markers, y'all, because I don't use blue nearly as much as I use them other colors. I might need to just hit this board with a little bit of alcohol or something later on. Okay, but so duty in a Sanskrit context, they call that dharma. So your dharma is the duty that you came in here with. They made this an externalized thing at some point to where it became duty to the state and duty to everything but what your spiritual duty was for you coming in here. You have a purpose. You're a force. You're an Orisha. And so if you don't know what your duty is while you're here, you just do any old nonsense. Like you were given tools and talents and all of this stuff that was specifically suited for your duty. So if you're using your talents for something that's other than your duty, you can't be surprised when nothing's working for you. But when you are using your talents for the duty that was assigned for you, everything just happens to go smoother. So one of the easiest ways that we know that we're using them for the right purpose is that things are happening fairly easy for us. That means that we are in cadence, just like I said. Pursuit of happiness. It's the regulation of cadence. Okay, so anyway, so they had this thing called the Dharma wheel. And we've talked about this. Because that's where we get our 8-point star, the Dengir symbol. And then we just associated the Dengir with the dwarves yesterday. So all those motifs in the mythologies to help you, piece this stuff together. This tells you that's your destiny. All right. Now, we've also talked about how this is specifically representative of the union of the circle and the square. You heard Dante just talk about that. In between, with this one representing Rudra Shiva. This one being Brahma, the creator. Sound like Tyler, right? So that you can focus in on that heart. Which is Vishnu. And then, for the most part, feminine mode manifestation in the yoni, Mohini. So Rudra and Mohini. Incidentally, Rudra is also Sirius. So he's the embodiment of the star Sirius. So me intuiting that my symbol was called the Sirius image, the Syrian image. It has proven over time to be a very clear communication. All right, and so we've got 8 points here. We've talked about that, how these come together. If you take the Yoa and then you trace these right here. It gives you those 8 points, and then that's how we get to right here. But what we haven't talked about is the relationship between a square and a matrix. Maybe we have, maybe we haven't, but oh yeah, we did very early, because I talked about those first 4 values in the alpha / ether, where they generate a 4x4 matrix. So there's 16 values in a 4x4 matrix when it comes to those alpha values. Now, one thing I want you to notice with the lessons, remember 19 told you the consequences of what your duty was, but if you wanted to know what it meant to be civilized in the first place, to be able to do your job effectively, you had to look at the 20th, right? Well, when it comes to matrices, and you'll see that this is something that occurs numerically fairly often, is that you get this concept so in Pascal's triangle in particular, you got 2 to the n, so each line is a power of 2, and then -1 would be the total of the numbers before that line. Okay, so this is something that occurs. So this idea of the +1. So remember, we had the 99 names of Allah +1. That 100th is the container for everything beneath it. We've talked about that. We've talked about how that in and of itself is the language of Akasha. So if you're reading the Akashic records, what you're doing is you're looking at the central concept that encompasses everything before that, or whatever. This is a recursive universe. It is operating like a torus. So like the donut. That object that goes through its own center. It's housed in itself. I can't reach over there. It reaches through itself. 3D donut. What are these guys here? You've seen it. Okay, 3D donut. Now, something I get into briefly within the Leopard in the Mirror is the topology of this thing, how this thing works. Now, come to the conclusion that space-time, hence 4D, is toroidal. Why is that important? Because of this hyperbolic geometry, meaning that it goes inward, it folds inward like this. Because of that, and the outside having its convex type of geometry out here, these two things, they cancel each other out. So that surface, topologically speaking, it equals 0. So it's no coincidence that this thing resembles a cipher at all. So that's the brilliance of the supreme mathematics already. And what they tell you, that every point in space is technically 0-dimensional. Okay, and the point of learning about Akasha and then being present to it, its existence, is so that you realize that space is not nothing. The vacuum is not nothing. It is filled with information. It's filled with ether, filled with Akash. And Akash is the carrier of vibration. Even if that sound is not yet audible, it is still carrying those potentials. And very likely in the form of goldstone bosons, massless particles, which are essentially sound, sound information within a crystalline structure. Crystal, that just means a repeating structure. So you make a structure using the same piece over and over. So that's essentially what these geometries I've been showing you are. So it's basically the different shapes that are used over and over and over to make the structures of space. Okay, and so if you wanted to read something that's invisible to you, you would have to be able to tune in on those geometries. Your brain has a filter called the thalamus, which naturally filters out most stuff so that you can only focus on survival. And therefore, that means that there's a great deal of things that you have to do in order to move beyond that simple survival mode and then actually be able to perceive information that allows you to have more advanced faculties as a human being. Move beyond the default model. You pretty much the equivalent of, you just got your phone out the case and then ain't put no apps or nothing on it. You just got raw hardware, and then you have to download the stuff that particularly you need and that you enjoy. And that's what we're doing here. All right, and so because of this zero topology, it means effectively that any given point on this thing experiences itself as the center of that object. So this is where we end up getting the concept of Ra as a sun. When we're talking about central sun, you're talking about a central principle, a central axis, the central idea from which everything is being manifested. In that regard, you are the sun at the center of your solar system. You are the concept around which your physical existence, spiritual existence, all of that is is organized. All right. Now, in order to physically manifest the simplest geometry that allows that within the packing of space, the most efficient tiling is, of course, that tetrahedron, which is why it has been central to everything I've been talking about. This is the house of David from which Jesus emerges. We talked about it at the center of the earth. So you've got that central concept. We put those two together, remember? You put them at the center of the sphere. And so you see the alignment between the center of the tetrahedron and the center of the planet. So what that's telling you is this is an amplification of what's going on at the center relative to you and everything in space. Now, here's the thing about it. There's this concept, BAO, which I got to remember what the acronym stands for. I know it's baryonic. And I might get to how I even arrived at looking at that. In particular, there was some word roots within the math itself. Like it's crazy how I end up coming upon this stuff. But let's see, baryonic. It's something orientation. I know the O is orientation. I just got to remember the A. But let's see, local orientation, BAOs. It's got to be right here somewhere. There we go. So baryons. So symmetry. Maybe I didn't write anything about it. Maybe I only read about it and didn't take any notes. Anyways, so what the BAO is in space. So in galactic organization of space, you got a situation where scientists have tracked like millions of instances where you have stars. Okay, acoustic oscillations. Okay, baryonic acoustic oscillations is what it is. Let me go ahead and write that. So baryonic, so it's talking about baryons, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. Acoustic oscillation. This explains the arrangement of stars in space. So your body is based on the same principle. All right, so they found all these instances where these stars were pretty much arranged in tetrahedral arrangements. And if we're looking at space-time as a toroidal model where wherever you're at, it puts you at the center of the entire system. From a geocentric standpoint, what makes us us and what regulates our existence and the way we manifest here in this unique way is that the earth is positioned in a very specific way relative to the stars. And I explored the possibility that, speaking of Sirius is part of a triangle called the Winter Triangle. That's made up of let me see if I remember all three of them. Let me see. I'm gonna say Betelgeuse and Orion should be one. Sirius is of course one, and I know Procyon is the other. Okay, now you got an inverse triangle on the other side of Orion, made by Deneb, Vega we've already talked about, and Altair. So we got a soaring or rising eagle, a swooping eagle, and then the tail of the hen right there. Okay, and this is called the summer triangle. Okay, if we compare that to our Yoa, the center line of the Yoa aligns with, so this is the Orion. So it makes sense that it would be in Orion. So the Yoa that they use in Central Africa is a map of this right here. So we got Sirius, Orion. Well, this is a Canis constellation, but Sirius is part of those. Orion in the center, and then over here is where you have like Lyra, Taurus, and Pleiades is coming over on this side, and all of this. But this is the key to understanding the projection of the universe here, which is why they put so much emphasis on Lyra and Vega in them stories. All right, and so as you can see, the Orion and the Kalunga line are aligned with Orion's belt, and this is a map of your own body as well. Your belt root, as we call it in Chinese medicine, is with your navel. So you have the your stomach on one side, liver on the opposite side. Your stomach represents Earth, your liver represents Venus. And so they meet in the center. And so if you understand the relationship between Earth and Venus, which we've determined was the star, you start kind of understanding the astronomy in your own body at that point. But the case in point, remember the East, that's the summer, so that's Kala. And then in the West, that's November, meaning winter. All right. So we got the two opposite elements. We got fire, and then we got, there should be water over there. Let me see, we got air and earth on these other side. But anyway, so in the West, so that's birth and death. We go through the Alamu, and then we come back up through the through here, crossing the Kalunga line into maturity, and then just go through the cycle here. All right. And so they talk about Source being related to this center star. So it very much aligns with Yoruba concepts in the Isheshe religion. Okay. Now, so this organizing principle is found in both you and the stars, and the spreading out of it in the stars is what allows you to understand you got the same organizational principles. And the reason I'm going to continue this with the entirely other series is because there's no better way to put it, Zakar, I remembered how to teleport. So when you're in an OBE, out of body experience, you can use water and mirrors as means to go to other locations and get real information for those locations. I kid you not. You don't have to believe me. You can take it with a grain of salt, but this is a trainable skill documented since the 1970s at least. If you just want to talk about official American reports, but talk of this, every single scripture talks about this using different terminology. Taking Enoch up to heaven. Daniel's having his visions in Daniel 7, and he's talking to another individual that's explaining the stuff to him. He was doing exactly what I'm talking about right here, right now. I did not know that was in the Bible like that until after I had this experience. I was trying to figure out, like, dang, I was like, this was very clear. I'm pretty sure if this was something real, I should be able to find something about it somewhere. And sure enough, it's everywhere. We just didn't know. Now, anyways, okay, so it's the way that space organizes itself. And why is it? It's because this type of arrangement allows every point to have the same math in it, which is why we said, so we had the two sayings. You heard Dante mention the geometry. God is always a geometer, which we established was a reference to pi, which is the relationship of the diameter of a circle to its circumference. And this just happens to be the Egyptian glyph for matter. So it's telling you that 180 degrees equals pi radians. Man, so like the level of detail to which these writing systems and glyph systems map the entire universe and the inner workings of your body and what you could do with the soul is ridiculous. It ain't just some foofy. The reason, religion may seem like kind of like airy fairy and, just like kind of made up by somebody to you is because the people teaching you have no idea how to explain it properly. They don't know the math. All they did was go to a theology school and memorize a bunch of shit and then impose it on you. Unless you understand the underlying math, you cannot understand clearly the magnificence of this creation and how there can be a God and that God be you at the same time. It's because everything is based around this concept right here. You will only ever experience the existence as you being the center of it. So you're the terminal that's generating your reality at any given point. All right. But the common ground, the common principle is ultimately what we're referring to as source or God at the end of the day. If your thinking is aligned properly. Okay. So that said, I figured out two key places where this 19 occurs. And after that, I'll be able to get into how we simplify this information. Like, how do you store this information? What's the easiest way to teach this information? We'll get into that. Okay, so there's two key places. Now, and Dr. Catherine in the Igbo History Museum, they get into this in a slightly different way, but it has all the same ingredients, proving that it's been part of, the Odinala and just everything that branched off from that same stuff. So this is same sciences from Lemuria to Atlantis to Egypt punt, kush, all of it. Everybody had the same stuff. And then most of y'all would slap the label on it, Kemetic science. Well, that Chem means black. It's the science of blackness. The backdrop of space, 99.9% or more of light is outside the visible spectrum. So most light is black to you. And it is a whole science of visibility. So 100% of your physical experience is associated with light. And it just so happens that we were just talking about baryonic acoustic oscillation. All of the mass, all of the visible mass is baryonic. It's baryons. And the two most popular baryons that you would know are the proton and the neutron. And remember, we made our Dharma wheel with a circle and 8 spokes, pretty much combining the Rudra, which was Shiva, and the Vishnu, Mohini joint. Well, the proton is associated with Vishnu. The neutron is associated with Shiva. And they're both at the core. They're at the center of the atom. Just for complete information, say Brahma would then be the electron, and electrons are leptons. They're a whole different class of particle. Now, baryons are interesting because they're actually made up of 3 subatomic particles. They're called quarks. So that one is made up of 3. So this is where we get concepts of trinity. And so the quarks, based on the Dogon teachings, are essentially the ka, the personality characters, the flavor carriers. And their personality is what's projected out from the chi that is at the center of all things. So once again, the Odinala system is showing that it is aligned and accurate with our physics, our sciences, and everything else. So in Odinala, it also tells you that the soul is made up of 4 parts. And each being, projection of one thing. So you got the part that carries your, the information, your lineage, the part that reincarnates. It's the observer each time. You've got the part of you, the chi, that is your guide. It's like your double. You've got the mu, which is your spirit, is the part that goes to the other side when you die, and then, preserves your spot in your virtual experience of this matrix situation or whatever. And then you have Mamadu, or just Madu, or whatever, which is your physical body or whatever that you experience here. So you're the Mamadu. You're the feminine aspect of that dichotomy between Chi and Eke. So it's essentially plasma based, but plasma being the fourth state of matter, it is the one that condenses into the other 3. And so there is a tetrahedral sort of relationship with respect to those 4 elements. And then you have the central concept, which is the Akash. And then remember, Akasha is the same as space, heaven, sky, the dot in the Sephiro tree, and the Duat underworld in Egyptian lore. Okay, so we're concerned about the center. What's at the center? The central concept from which this thing generates the quarks that come together in order to piece together the particles of physical matter. So this arrangement. So remember, our tetrahedron it looks like it's doing something with the center, but this is actually a shadow projection of only the outside points, the 6 outside lines, and the 6 outside faces, right? Now, I just thought about something, y'all. It's not that important, but it does have me curious. Curious guy. Nah. All right. And so anyway, so surface, these faces on the surface. And what happens is, if we pay attention to the fact that this is a 3D object, so triangle at the bottom, triangle face, triangle face, triangle face, there is a center to this 3-dimensional object that forms like a kind of tripod structure inside of this. All right, so that adds, says points, lines, so that adds an additional 4 lines and a point in the center to this, for a total, so that gives us something like this, a 5, 10, 4 situation. And the sum of that is 19. The entire universe is made up of that structure right there. That's what you're looking at with the 19 code, essentially. That's a simplification of the overall, but this is the inner, and as you can see, that adds an additional 5 to the original 14 we had, which is associated with the noon, the primordial waters. And then you add the 5, which was associated with the guide, the Torah. Five letters. There's all kind of acronyms associated with it. But so this is a guide through navigating the primordial waters, aka the Akashic record. Tower of Babel represented the conflation of the languages, meaning that everything got mixed together, essentially becoming Krishna Yajurveda. Yajurvedas are associated with sacrifice. And regardless of what you've come to understand that word to mean, that comes from to make sacred. And to make sacred means to make whole, to make complete. And remember, complete was our meaning of teth, which started out looking like that right there. Our 9th letter, associated with Odi, the Odi and Odinala, and this is the womb. So sacrifice means to become aligned with the matrix, with the womb, the mother. So what happens is, when we make something clear, which is Shukla, Yajurveda, that's when we separate the actions from we separate the knowledge from the wisdom. So if you look at this as just being everything all together, maybe I might even make that a cipher. It's everything. Then we have to distinguish the knowledge from the wisdom. So we had something that was complete to where we couldn't even see it. And we had to separate the potential from the kinetic, masculine from the feminine, left from the right. We need chirality here. And then once we do that, we could be the next point between these, the observer, and then be able to produce an understanding. So any experience that we have is going to require a point in the center and then three perspectives. The two halves and then the understanding of them both that runs in the center. So this is why 3 is a golden number. This is why love is understanding and not two separate qualities. And then who overcomes this burden by understanding it resides in paradise. They become the people of the right. So there's chirality right there, the people to the right. When those scientists were searching these baryonic oscillations out here, these BAOs, acoustic oscillations, they were looking specifically to see if more of them were oriented towards the right or were they more oriented toward the left. Because why does it matter? Like they always get into it's just coincidence that it's shaped that way. No, it's shaped that way specifically from when we're on Earth, which shows that our perception is attuned to perceiving those specific stars brighter than the others so that they appear as asterisms. So it's no accident to the design of the constellations and the fact that it only aligns that way if you're a person whose frequency is such that you can manifest on Earth. So when all of this ET stuff and all that crazy wild shit, interdimensional stuff start becoming public, that's the part you need to understand. Because these are entities and other humans who understand the concept of we live in a vibrational universe where every point is connected to every other point. And so even what we perceive as moving from one place to the other is just a smooth mapping of us changing our frequency so that we resonate with a specific position in that space. And what does it mean to change your frequency? It essentially means that you are changing the orientation of the spatial tetrahedrons that are manifesting you. So if you just look at yourself as a specific arrangement of tetrahedrons, and as you turn those tetrahedrons simultaneously in various directions, it changes the way people perceive you, and there's a part of you that coordinates such that all of those things move at the same time so that you don't have to worry about trying to move all trillion, however bazillion of those make you up, because it is a mathematical transformation. You don't have to deal with the calculations and everything else, because the math, the computational, the calculus is located within every single point of space. So it's like, so you don't have to consciously figure that part out. You just will your body and it does all the rest. Space does all the rest. And then that is one of the things that makes you God. It's one of the things. There are aspects to that, perception of that light. You're surrounded by light, all sides. Stars, sun, moon, all of that is surrounding you. And that radiation from those things are all converging on you as a single point, like that hyperbolic geometry I told you about at the center of the torus. And so what happens is it forms a very specific interference pattern between those light impressions. And it is within that interference pattern that the matrix knows how to render your body at that point relative to that starting point that you were at. This is why the snapshot of the sky at the time of your birth and the time of your birth and location of your birth, why all that stuff comes into play with the zodiac. But once again, if you're only perceiving that as something outside of you controlling who you are, as opposed to you recognizing that you manifested as a spark of the divine in a specific point, and then the rest of the universe had to conform to it. Until you understand it in that way, you will forever be a slave to anything anybody throws at you, because it's always just going to be a lesser manifestation of that. Okay? All right, so clarifying what's really meant by sacrifice, to make complete, to consecrate is to become aligned. If we turn that into a Dharma wheel, this creates 45-degree angles, and as taught by Sadhguru, 45 degrees when you're building sacred sites and things is inherently consecrated. It automatically consecrates, purifies with the energies in that area. And originally, if you go to you probably had to go to a Catholic church or some older churches, but originally all baptismal pools were octagonal, or at least a little christening tray. Okay. The reason for that being is that's how you get those. That's the geometry that pulls that stuff to the heart, to the center, and then aligns you with your purpose. So the purpose of baptism, when done properly, you are submerged in water, which is the manifestation of the interference pattern. So essentially, what water is, and the reason that it forms funnels so easily, vortexes within it, is because it's basically a liquid crystal. It's basically a liquid torus in and of itself. So when that the plasma still has that information, the plasma that makes up everything. And so when it's organized and it cools and then is able to form ice, it's able to form water, that's essentially what it's doing. Now, this efficient orientation, so when we freeze ice, it takes on, you'll find, like, as I'm talking about this is all about water, and that's what we established with the geometry earlier. But when you freeze it, and interestingly enough, iron does this too. So on the surface of the planet, iron takes on a cubic lattice. So it's shaped like a cube. And then we talked about the various orientations of the cube. But at the center of the earth, the iron that's in the center of the earth, it becomes a hexagonal prism. So it takes on a hexagonal orientation. Go ahead and draw that. Now from this 2D projection, that kind of reminds you of a tesseract, doesn't it? All right, but what that is, you got the 6 like this, takes on an arrangement like that, and then it's got a central axis, which we call the C-axis, connecting those two. So this is how you get your 12. So we go from having 12 lines making the whole cube to 12 lines making two faces that are facing each other, parallel to each other. And that's these prisms. Iron does that. And remember, iron is number 26, and then 26 is the gematria for Yahweh. It's the letters of our alphabet is the arm span. Of the pentagram. The star that comes out of Yaakov, we already talked about all this. Okay, so water takes this thing on, and the double. You remember we had our double cube, and you know the importance of that in the model. Well, most of our matter is taking a form like this, right here, with these 3 parallel. So this is essentially what water is doing. This is what allows it to have its properties. This is why ice is able to float in water, because the stuff that's happening on the microscopic level with those tetrahedral alignments is allowing it. So you can basically think of each of these triangle slices as being the face of a tetrahedron to a degree. But it basically spreads it out. So as it's stiffening it, it's actually creating more space as well. And because of that, instead of it becoming more dense, it becomes less dense, but at the same time, it prevents the liquid water from being able to pass through that lattice. So water is backwards in that way, to where instead of the more dense thing floating in water, ice becomes less dense and is still able to float in water. So the whole concept of Christ walking on water is related to this. Okay. Now, the reason I bring your attention to this is because you'll notice that this lattice, if we got 3 hexagons, that's 6 point. So we got 6 line, 6 line, 6 lines. So that gives you your 66. 666. But the most important, the turning axis, that's actually its strongest, so it's hardest to transform or warp ice along this central axis, which is called the C-axis. And so if we consider that as one central concept, the point at the center of the 6 shared by all of them, remember a point is 0. This is like it's all the same point. These might as well be all folded into each other. That'll give us our 1. And then once again, that gives us our 19. So if you understand how moving to that center point of and in fact, if I go ahead and I draw lines from all of these toward the center point like this, you get this hourglass type of situation. Those 6-sided pyramids like that with the point at the top or whatever, they had those in Nigeria. They're called the Nsude pyramids. And the British came in and destroyed all of them joints. They were made from like mud brick and stuff, and then they came in and destroyed them because they wanted to continue to sell that story that there weren't any pyramids anywhere else, especially not West Africa or whatever. But you basically got 2 of those coming together at a single point, and it has this hourglass orientation that very much resembles what we call Minkowski space, which explains 3D space with respect to the movement of time as a function of light moving through a center. So this would be the past, and then this would be the future. And so this pull to the center and then push out through the top and then down through the sides back around, that's doing the same thing as the donut. Okay, so this is how you can see that this same principle is distributed throughout the entire universe. All right. So now that you understand the geometry a little bit, we then get into what's happening in the math standpoint. And I think I'm going to go ahead, finish this out in one sitting, because like I honestly believe I should probably do an entire separate course on this. Like we understand how 19 specifically is at the root of all this, and that satisfies the burden of making sure we have an inkling as to why the 19 code is significant in the Quran. But we've uncovered some important things that require that we do some more work together, specifically on those topics. All right, so all of that stuff I was telling you about the transformations between, all that geometry, it was dealing with water. We established that we were talking about water. Okay, and in the past we talked about the relationship of Pascal's triangle and those elements. So we talked about how these first few lines, 4, 6, 4, 1. Let's go ahead up to 5 because we talked about it's a 5D projection. So your soul is 6-dimensional, and from it, from a single point, it projects a 5D plenoptic experience with 4D time, 3D spatial experience, 2D surfaces, one-dimensional relationship lines drawn, so we have linear perception, and then all centered on points that serve as the container for all of this. Okay, so we've already talked about the breakdown of this, of how this top part spells a Kaaba, the latter and then the totals 7. We talked about how Kaaba can be derived from that and it means cube. We talked about how this line or whatever it actually spells out, well, it has the same sort of 8 points of a cube. We talked about how you had Jacob inside of it, the two twins. So this is in the womb of, I believe their mother, was their mother Leah or was that one of the wives? So whoever Isaac's wife was, I remember that Isaac was the father. So Abba, A-B-A, is the father. Now contained within this too, I don't know if I pointed out to you, but you got A, U, so the 21, and then 13 is M, so that's on. Ha ha ha, tricky, right? Anyways, that's our cube. Then we talked about here. So each one is the container of the previous. So a line is the container. Line is the container of the point. This is the first time we get a 3-dimensional object in the form of the square. So it's a container for lines. Here's the cube here. With its 8 points. And then this is 16, it's our hypercube. So cube within a cube with 16 points. We're just gonna represent it like that for now. Cube within a cube. All right, and then within that, we talked about how the nestled within that is the object within the object, symmetry break, we get the 4, 6, 4 points and lines and surfaces of a tetrahedron, which is the most effective way to tile space. And then we talked about, so this is the pentaract, which is like having 10-sided objects. It's like 3 concentric figures. So 10, 10, 10, so a total of 31 points like this. Okay. And this total is 32. So we talk about how 32, how n plus 1 is the container for the previous. So the space, the container of this 31 point structure is 32. All right, and within it, we've got that that 30 that was related to the contact between the 30 faces of icosahedron, which is water, and the 30 points. Excuse me, hold on. All right, so you got 30 lines in an icosahedron, as well as 30 lines in a dodecahedron, which is Akash. So the relationship between them two is facilitated by 30. So that suggests that the 31 is the container of the 30. So we have information of the 30 plus the 1. We got this figure right here, which I explained before was a solenoid, a stable standing wave situation, which is composed of, which is basically what you see when you take a cross section of DNA. So when you cut DNA across the side, I told you about the relationship between line 5 and line 3, whereas our DNA has a 5:3 ratio, where it basically creates, it has a pentagonal structure and then a triangle structure on this is on each side of the helix, and then it alternates to where we instead got another triangle over here and then a pentagon on this side, like this. And it just keeps going back and forth like that. So in order for us to be able to tell that it's alternating like that, we need at least 3 to show that. And so the way that it packs and it connects, so the triangles relate to each other. The pentagons will relate to each other, and they'll do this at a specific angle, and that's how your DNA is made up. Okay. So it's basically going 5, 3, 3, 5, 5, 3, back and forth. And then that same 5, 3, 5 reflection times 2, because you got DNA from, well, let's just say that that's the orientation as it's going down. So we got pentagram, triangle, pentagram. This side we got 3, 5, 3. So we basically got 2 of the same thing happening. So we might as well just go ahead and look at that is 2 times 5, 3, 5, which equals the 10, 6, 10. That gives us our alphabet. Yod Hey Vav Hey. Okay. So this is the means by which this information, this tiling of space, programs information into your DNA for you to be able to build a body around yourself. Okay. And that's all with these first 5 lines. Okay. So if we convert this thing right here into a matrix, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So line 0, line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, line 6. Okay, so we're going to do a 6 by 6 matrix. 6 matrix. Interestingly enough, 6 by 6 matrix is a common commonly used for robotics and kinematics, representing spatial velocity or stiffness. That stiffness is super important to all of this. That's the whole point. Stiffness. How do you go from being liquid to being solid? How do you go from being water element to being earth element? This is how it happens. Okay, and so if I go ahead and build this out as a 6 by 6 matrix, it's 36. And remember, 36 is important to your body as a human being. 36 vital points. If we got solenoids, there are these 10-point situations associated with the heart, because the heart chakra has 10 petals. That gives us 360. That's complete. That's whole. All right. 360 degree view. That a cipher is 360 degrees. And I'm going to do me a few ciphers because I got to in order to make me a matrix. So line 1, I got the 1, and then I got to have 5. I want this thing to be a square, so I'm going to do that there. How you do that there? And spread them out like that. Utilize my space. Okay. All right, so we got 1, so we got to do it, making sure it's the same as this over here. So we got to have our 1, and it's going to leave nothing but zeros the rest of the line. 2, 1, rest of your zeros. 3, 3, 1. You see how the 1s are cascading down here in the diagonal? Boom. Need our 4, 6, 4, 1. There's your 0. And then this guy right here, 5, 10, 10, 5, 1. Okay. So because this is the last line, this is the container for the rest of it. Okay. This is going to be 0 dimensional. This is going to be your 1 dimension, 2 dimensional, 3 dimensional, 4 dimensional, 5 dimensions. So we're dealing with 5 dimensions. So this is the point of the projector. This is all the paths of light. I'm probably doing this hella backwards. I should probably be going from this direction where you got boop, 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 and boop. But this being a container right here is very important. So we going from out there. So your 0 point and then opening up. So yeah, that's fine. Okay, so this is our 0 point, and then we're opening up from here dimensionally through our transformations. And so this is the ultimate. So this is the center of object. This is the space outside of the surface right here. That's the containing space, the Akash. Okay, and so this ultimately gives us 6 different dimensions to work with. So this the whole thing the soul is projecting. And then that hexagonal thing that I showed you earlier, that was 6 dimensions. That's what that represents. Okay, and so now we got a triangle that's a right triangle. So when we make something right, we are aligning it and everything else so we can see something else. Now, what's beautiful about this, so this, remember this line right here totals 32, whereas everything below it, everything else, the total of that is 31. And we talked about the significance of the number 3. Well, from that Legendre's 3-square equation that we started off the whole series with, if we plug that into that equation, that equals 31. So this tells you that this 31 right here should have something to do with bridging to 4-dimensional space, and that's exactly what it's doing. So that's just another way to demonstrate the exact same thing that I told you before. But it's much easier to draw this 6x6 matrix, is it not? Okay, like I'm giving you the keys to be able to explain this to somebody if you need to prove that the black man is God instead of just trying to convince somebody. You got to wreck all their science and their math, because that's the only thing we can both verify with each other. You can't experience my experience for me or whatever, but we all can experience the math, which is why they say, God's my geometry. Allah for me is sufficient. Allah's my computer, my calculator is what it says. It's you. But what part of you is what we're figuring out. Okay. So something interesting happens here. So I've taught before, so the diagonals of this thing give you the values for the Fibonacci sequence. So this 1 is going to give me 1. I got another 1. It's going to give me 2. It's going to give me 3. You see, I'm just adding these up. 1, 3, 1. And then these zeros. That gives me 5. And then out here, this gives me the total 8. So 8 is my boundary. That's what we've talked about since day one about Yata, how that 19 deals with that 9. I mean, that 19 deals with not Ya and Ta or whatever. So the completion of the palm, the completion of the holder, the container, Yata. That's what we're talking about. And Garasu, the crow, remember that was to call. So it's the sound. We're talking about the CMBR, the background radiation converted into sound, the next octave. Remember that, guys? So that was I see why. All right. We talked about this. How there's twice the Schumann resonance of the Earth. So your bodily design is made specifically for this planet. Your brain, the way your mind works, your perception is made specifically for this planet, to be able to connect with the edge of the universe as it's seen from this planet. All right. So 8 is our container. So there's something fascinating that happens here. So this is the design of your hand right here. So 11 is Kaf, which means palm. 23 is the it's Kaf final. So whenever it's a final letter, it instead becomes this right here. And then you got 5 fingers on your palm. So that's your fingers. Now, that same, and mind you, this is the Fibonacci sequence we're talking about here. It's Fibonacci. All right. And which is associated with 5. So let's go ahead and put that right there. So that's what's wrapping this, that's what's connecting it all. That's what's giving you your form. Remember, this geometry right here is based on 5 Fibonacci relationships. 5, 3. All right, and 4, 7, 12. Okay, total that up. That's what gives you your 12 for this is what gives you your 12 for descent. That's the 8 that makes it 20, which is the container for your 19. Okay, it's the cover for the book. All right, and anyways, so that 1, 2, 3, 5 gives you the word alki, which I also talk about in the book, which is a half lion, half bird, male griffin, used in medieval times to represent Jesus Christ as the union between the beast nature of the lion and then the heavenly nature of the eagle. So this is largely at the root of what the tribe of Shabazz is. And Nebuchadnezzar at the beginning of Daniel 7. So the lion with wings that loses those wings, stands up with and has the heart of a man. Nebuchadnezzar as a precursor to the story of Jesus. So they're all the same exact story, and it's this. That's the program that is running in the matrix right there to show you how the torus, the space-time torus, manifests from mental to physical, which is born. All right, and so now one thing that has to be reconciled with this is that not only is this associated with the number 8 through that Fibonacci sequence, it also happens. So with these zeros forming this barrier here, I have, with my ones, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I've got 11 on this one. Naturally, I'm going to have 9 on this one. And those are my only two out of these that, no, because I could do that and that. So let's look at the lines of the code that have that structure in Pascal's triangle real quick. So we needed one that only had the 1. We had one that had the 3, which would be U. We had one that had the, did I have one from 1 through 5? I don't think I needed all of those, did I? Oh, well, I know I erased it, but I still got this matrix up somewhere. Okay, so let me see. So I got boop. Okay, no. Yeah, the only ones that do that are, so we got the one with 3 in them. So the only ones that do it evenly, just like that. U, and U, and U. Okay, yeah, I was right. All right, so the 1, 1, 2, 1. Then we got the one that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, so who has 7? It should be U. So that's 7. And then finally, we have this one that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, which would be line 10. Okay, so line 10 is going to be the one that's got 252 in the middle. What was it? Yeah, 210, 210, 210, 120, 120, 45, 45, 10, and 1. Okay, so this one, let's see if that's 2 to the 8. This should be 2 to the 16th, I believe. Hold on, make sure I'm doing math right. No, that should be 2 to 16. That's like 2 to the 32. Anyways, the total of this one is going to give you 10, 24. Total of this one is going to give you, let's see. So 50 plus 12, 62. So that's just 64. This one's going to give you your 4. This one's going to give you your 1. Okay, so basically it's raising stuff to the 4, so 16. So this is this cubed. And then that is times 4, right? That's a little more than 4. All right, anyways, case in point. Let's see, 46, 126, 225, 226, 256, 226. Okay, boom, boom, boom. All right, so these are the main ones that are forming containers for everything beneath it. Okay, so this is line 6, line 10, line 4, and 1. Now, interestingly enough, with chakras, The one with 10 petals is the solar plexus. The one with 6 is the sacral. The one with 4 is the root. So this is the lower body that we're looking at. So that actually aligns with the sacral. Like in the model that I showed you in the beginning, this would be the sacral. Line 8 would have aligned with the root chakra, and then this is actually dealing with the knee chakras. Okay, so the knee chakra. Something I found out that's interesting about this number 252 is that in the Zohar, which is the Hebrew Kabbalah stuff, it says that the woman has 248 spiritual limbs plus the 4 on her physical body, which gives her 252. So this is the ancestral link to the mother. Now, 20, mind you, is the 20th letter is Ra in Arabic. So this is the link. So everything between those is the umbilical cord, umbilical link between you and your mother, your ancestral chakra. So there is a distinct relationship between your central concept, your C-axis, and your mother. Now, the central frequency that's at the center of all things is Om. Okay? And it just so happens that the divine feminine, which is represented by the Sri Yantra, which becomes Meru Yantra when it's in 3D, is the shape of Om. So this mountain that forms from this right here, this Pascal's triangle, is that. And so the whole concept of the star and moon is encompassing this concept of combining the the Shiva Pancha Shakshara Yantra or whatever, which gives you your form, which is associated with it, 15.66 hertz in 66 frequency, and then this one right here. Let me see, was it 130 or 136? I think it was 136.1 hertz. Let me check that. Let me see if I can find it in a quick manner. I want to make sure. I want to see if it was 130.1 or if it was 136.1. It'll still work with the alphabet either way, but I just want to make sure I got the right one. So frequency of Sri Yantra. That don't do it. I know another way to get to it. Don't worry. Let me see. Not that one. That's that hippy dippy shit right there. That's not the one. Let's see. Cause they just associate. Don't pay attention to where it just kind of tries to associate it. There's an actual frequency that I should have put cymatic frequency of cymatic frequency of. In fact, I did have that on. I did that on AI already. Let me see if they got the whole answer. Not you. Let's see. Oh, there it is. 136.1. Okay, that's what I thought. Boom. All right, so 136.1. Why is that significant? Why is that relevant? Because if I take 13, 6, and 1, it's mean, Vav, and the left, and that is the letters. So it's Om backwards. So this is the reverse of Om, and then because we read Hebrew from right to left, that is Om. So the frequency actually, so just like how this frequency says Siwa in Arabic, this one has Om in Hebrew backwards. Okay, and so that, and then Om is said to be the embodiment of one of Vishnu's avatars. I believe it was Krishna, but Vishnu was also Mohini and stuff, and so they pair between those two. So when we're talking about the pairing between the masculine and the feminine in those situations, we're actually talking about the mother and the male child. So this is Jesus and Mary relationship. Okay. So that Om is in the physical container. The Shiva is the octave that is informing the brainwaves here, and the harmonic off of that before you reach that is the 14.33 hertz. The Shin, so sh, in. All right, or Nash the other way, but Shin, that's your divine spark. And then the difference between that 15.66 and this was the 1.33, with 133 being equal to 19 times 7. So this right here, it ain't just some religious stuff in Islam or whatever. It is supported by the frequencies. And remember, I told you frequency addresses are how we teleport around this thing if you develop your technology properly. But the idea was, when you hear about these miracles and these crafts that could just jump from one place to another real fast and all this, that's what it's based on. Even some of the yogis you hear can kind of fade out of view and go elsewhere. They just reorienting that geometry real quick to where it aligns more so with another frequency, which is associated with another location. Now, I think it's the last thing. Primary reason I wanted to pull attention to these outer edges. So on that matrix that I drew, if we look at 6 dimension as a container for the 5 dimensional, it's the one that's projecting the spark. So it's the lifeline from mama into the matrix. It gives us a 5x5 pyramid. And we had 36 total in that other. So the 5x5 pyramid has 31. So plus 5 equals that 36. Where's the 5 coming from? So remember I told you, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, and refinement, or whatever. That's your 5 right there. Interestingly enough, in these matrix physics and these transformations and the behavioral water and how it applies to the same matrix transformations in this lattice, because you'll find that this shape right here is very relevant to the way that water molecules arrange themselves when in liquid form. So it goes from this to, so this is frozen form, liquid form, liquid and frozen. Interesting, right? Container and fluid motion, current. It says there's 5 distinct values that show up in there. So if I only have my 5x5 part of the matrix, so these are degrees of freedom. So if the outside part of the 6th dimension was the container, these are the parts that we can actually do something with and do something about. So now our container is this outside one right here. Okay, so that we're just looking at the alky that's moving through the 8 degrees of space. We just want the alky. And so the outside rim of that one gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the line that has 9 values is line 8, which is where our root chakra is. 56, 70, 56, 28, 8, 1. This is the one that we associated with the Iboga plant or whatever in other videos or whatever. Whereas you've got this 168 representing the number of notches on the Shango bone and the number of electrons in the in ibogaine, the active chemical in the Iboga plant. And then the 2 previous lines, which I just want you to look at real quick. So once that should be 21. I know 20 is in the center here. So 1, 2, 3. That's it. So that should be 1. Yeah. Somebody's making you 56, so you need 35, 21. I'm doing something backwards, huh? 21. Oh, no, I'm not, because that plus that equals that. So 7 and 1. And then the previous one before that, we looked at just a minute ago. Hold up, I am doing something off. So this should just be 35. That's what threw me off. That should just be 35, 35, and then this should be 20. There we go, 15. I'm doing it backwards, so. All right, so anyway. Okay, so these 3 lines right here, I'm going to show you something. Okay, so this right here is Ayin. In gematria meaning eye, or spring, fountain. This is where the 2, seeds come together. Start forming you, your ancestral link. This right here, we said that's raw. 20 is raw. And that also means head or origin. So Lord or head or origin. So both of these have something to do with origin. So we got raw and we got eye. Eye of raw. There's your connection between your root and your sacral. All right, now within these, the total of this line is that really 512? That doesn't sound right. Oh, well, this line 9. So I actually needed line 9 that I was going to show you. With line 9, the total on that guy. All right, so let's look at some. I'll just write it out. Okay, so the line. So this guy is 256 right off top. So 256. That's it. Not wrong one. U256. 256 is our 8. So that means it's going to be half of that, 128. This is going to be half of that, which is 64. So we talked about 64 earlier. All right. So the next 2 lines, the total is going to be double that. So we got 512 and then 1024. Now this, when it comes to these 2 in between ones, so we got these associated with I or raw. Now in between those, this 128 points to the letters L, so 12, 8. We want to look at L, H. In Egyptian, we don't have L, so it instead becomes Rak, like this, which basically means knowledge. So the bridge between Ra and his eye is the knowledge. So the eye of Ra is the one that projects the knowledge, and the eye of Ra is Sekhmet / Bastet. So Baz from Black Panther stuff represents the knowledge of the sun that we've been talking about. Then she becomes, so Sekhmet becomes either Bastet or Taweret, depending on the purpose, because Taweret represents, they're both like the maternal, the birthing thing. It's the same being, but this is the more fierce aspect of the mother protecting, the process of birth and whatever else. But Taweret is the female form of Tawara, from which we get Torah. So physical manifestation of the Torah. So going from the oral, and her name comes from Tara, and so that's Orit, and so Orit is the Ethiopian Gear's name for the Torah. So that they were all talking about that. So Sekhmet had to be sent from Egypt down into Nubia to cool off and then come back. What they're talking about is they had to straighten up the Egyptian understanding of the knowledge by going down there to Nubia, going to Kush, and then getting the correct understanding, getting it written down, taking the oral tradition and then actually putting it in written form or whatever, which relates to the kingdom of the Congo. So Ethiopia and then the kingdom of Congo, all of that. All right, so that's the Rick. Now, 256 is, of course, the Ifa Odu. So when they wrote it down, this became your Ark of the Covenant, created 6004 BC. Creation, according to the Bible, the Adam and Eve story, the Eden story, they say started in 4044 BC, and then the Jewish mysticism says that the Torah was originally created by God 2,000 years before the creation. So the gods they talking about are us, the Orisha. Okay, and then that's what gives them their Torah. Now 512, if we keep going up this ladder, 512, which is associated with line so line 9. Five and 12 is L. So that's L, the God of the Torah. L is this right here. So the letter that they use for A, and then the Lamed. That's the same source as Allah. Allah is Al Ilah. These are all the same concepts. So it's talking about this right here. So the knowledge of the sun is transported by virtue of understanding the star. Okay, and then we talked about how down there, the 252 that's down here, it was associated with this 1024. We talked about how that 252 was the mother, her limbs, her divine limbs, and her physical ones. Okay, and so 1024 implies, let's come over here, it implies J and X. We talked about how that X is actually a sh. So this is either going to be, we either going to pronounce that as Ish, meaning man, husband, companion. So this is man. The first man is the physical outside part. Like I told you, that's the Eke. So it's not that we're saying that you're all women, but the physical manifestation of you is manifested by the wisdom. That's why you call the wise man wisdom. Okay, remember the wise man's equality. It's 26, Yahweh. So they telling you it's a man. They tell you straight up it's a human. He incarnated as a human. He was the leader of that group of, I guess you would call them angels or patal, the builders. So they're deployed by the one and it fractalizes into what we call either archangels or Orisha. Okay, and they incarnate now. In terms of Egyptian, 1024 corresponds to Yod and Shin. So we were looking at a potential meaning of Yashi. So if we look for a Yash or Yashi, Josh, Yashua, but at least Yash, it's Yashi. In Mandarin, I told you how much fun things we find out in Chinese. In Mandarin, Ya means tooth. So that's the meaning of Shin. So we know we dealing with this with the right stuff. That divine spark. And Shi basically means rock or to harden. So the hardening of the Shin. In fact, the wildest thing about it is that the actual definition they give for this word is calculus. Because calculus originates from a meaning of like the hardening of calcium. So bone, the hardening of bone. Ishango bone is the origin of calculus. Shango bone. Jesus tells Peter that he would be the rock, the foundation on which the church would be built. Peter's name means rock. That's she. When you pronounce she like this, that's the source of samurai. The symbol for samurai. So all the stuff about the Yatagarasu is coming back into play. Now, if we're talking about the hardening of the shin into bone, we are talking about the hardening of fire. So the stiffening associated with fire is that tetrahedron, which is why 464 equals the 5-4-5 ratio of the markings on the Ishango bone for a total of 14, which is associated with that noon. Okay? So even in their language, the same thing. The math of hardening the spark is what calculus is. So the entire church, the whole thing was built on calculus. The word algebra, also an Arabic word, and the likely source of the name Gabriel, so algebra, Jibril, Gabriel, is algebra. Peter, calculus. Tyre. So the Phoenician city of Tyre is a source of the sword that appears in Zechariah, also means rock. Calculus, the hardening of the bone. This is your proof. Kusha, Atlantis. They were talking about Central Africa. Lemuria, yeah, we were outside of Africa before that. Before Lemuria, we weren't even in completely in physical manifestation. But it's all preserved in the math, y'all. That's what I'm telling you. The whole story, all the old mythologies, the complete black story is in this matrix right here. These numbers that I've shown you since the beginning of this thing. That's what the 19 code is. It's you. Self is savior. I can't break it down any more than that. I got plenty of more slides and stuff, but it all points to the same thing, which is why, I do other videos, driving this point home. What's your duty as a civilized person? What does it really mean to civilize? One having that fire, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and refinement. It is not a savage, hasn't lost the knowledge of yourself. But that's enough. That's enough. I got enough videos now to schedule all the way up to April 30th, the end of the month. So I think that's a perfect stopping point. I'm recording this on April 19th. I think that's perfect synchronicity. The 19th. And this 19 code. I think we're going to wrap it up here, y'all. Make sure you grab your leopard in the mirror. If you want to see it in action, to break down and get some of these delicious sources of where some of this information is coming from. I had so many dad blasted sources. I did this like a real research paper. I was not playing with y'all. This is a real book. Something you can hold in your hand. But there it is, y'all. 19 code. Self a saving. I'll let you see me before we go. Uh-oh. I don't want you seeing that shit. I'm still in here doing laundry. Yeah. Yeah, we just tore the room apart. Putting stuff up. But yo, it's been a ride. I hope you understood something now that you know this thing it's not a simulation in the sense of this. Somebody made a computer and blah, blah, blah. The universe just works like a computer. Your soul projects this thing like a computer. Your computers are made based on how you actually work. Just like how power lines are based on your central nervous system and the way your brain works. The way irrigation in ancient times was built around the same way that they understood how your circulatory system works with your blood. That's all this thing ever was. All your technologies are just you. And so the next frontier is understanding yourself and your innards enough to where you can verify any information you want. So that means in future videos, we'll be talking about out-of-body experience and the science behind that. How you get out, see it for yourself instead of taking other people's word for shit. Now that you know how to navigate the do-what, I've taught you what you need to have in here so that when you over there, then it isn't just crazy scrambled information or just showing you some wild stuff. It gives you straight up information. In fact, after you've clicked and you've seen what your purpose is supposed to be, you might not even necessarily need to do out-of-body experiences too much after that, because it just starts coming too. So just like how it comes to me after I connect it to spirit, if I ever decide I want to do some magic tricks or do something crazy to impress y'all, you know what I'm saying? And I mean, I can always, do that. But then once you get to this point right here, there's no point in it. Like, you'll just be for entertainment at that point. When I could just walk right out, teach somebody this right here, and you pretty much got the tools you need to be a master in calculus and all the stuff they could get. If you still love the world to where you want to improve things by going into the sciences or teaching in college or whatever else, I basically giving you the beeline right there. Even if you want to be a science fiction writer, if you want to have solid plot and physics, I guarantee you every story in some way, shape, or form points back to the one story. There's always a initiation and a inciting incident, not exciting, inciting. So the thing that causes them to go on the journey, they achieve the goal or whatever, and then some transformation has happened with the main character by the end of it. That's every story ever. That's the God descends into matter, becomes man, forgets, remembers that he's God, and then returns. And just keep doing that over and over and over. That's all of it. That's all of it. And yet people are blowing each other up. They're keeping people down. Y'all eating struggle meals right now. When you have the power to manifest whatever it is you want, you can know whatever you want. All of that. If you want to figure out the solutions, you got to go straight to the source. I'm trying to take you straight to the source. You ain't got to take my word for it. I'm trying to take you straight to the source so you can see it for yourself. Find the answers you need and understand what your part is in all of it. What's your dharma? What's your duty as a civilized person? And that's what the next series will be about. Your duty, how to find out your duty as a civilized person. And on that note, I'm going to say, peace. 19 Code Lecture Series, we out.